Appeal to emotion. This fallacy manipulates an emotional response in place of a valid argument. For example, using heart-wrenching images of animals to persuade people to donate money to a charity. Instead of addressing the actual effectiveness or need of the charity, the focus is on generating a strong emotional reaction to compel action. Strawman. This involves misrepresenting someone's argument to make it easier to attack. For example, if someone argues for a more balanced education policy and their opponent responds by saying they want to remove all standardized testing, they're creating a strawman. The original argument was about balance, not eliminating testing entirely. Red herring. Introducing irrelevant information to distract from the real issue. For example, if during a debate about climate change someone starts talking about their favorite TV show, they are introducing a red herring. The goal is to divert attention away from the important topic at hand. Circular reasoning. This occurs when the conclusion of an argument is used as a premise. For instance, saying, "The Bible is true because it says so in the Bible" is circular reasoning. The argument relies on the assumption that the Bible's claim is true without independent evidence. Ad hominem. This fallacy attacks the character of the person making the argument rather than addressing the argument itself. For example, if someone dismisses another person's ideas on healthcare reform by pointing out their personal flaws or past mistakes, they are committing an ad hominem fallacy, false dilemma, presenting only two options when more exist. For example, saying, "You're either with us or against us," ignores other possible positions. This fallacy limits the discussion to two extremes and disregards any middle ground or alternative solutions. Appeal to authority. This fallacy involves relying on the opinion of an authority figure rather than the argument's validity. For instance, arguing that a specific medical treatment is effective solely because a celebrity endorses it without scientific evidence is an appeal to authority. Hasty generalization, making a broad claim based on a small or unrepresentative sample. For example, meeting a few rude people from a specific country and concluding that everyone from that country is rude is a hasty generalization. It doesn't account for the diversity within the population. Appeal to nature, suggesting that something is better or more valid because it is natural. For instance, arguing that natural remedies are superior to pharmaceutical drugs solely because they are natural, without considering effectiveness or safety, is an appeal to nature. Special pleading, applying a double standard or making an exception without justification. For example, claiming that a certain rule doesn't apply to oneself or one's beliefs, while insisting that it applies to everyone else, is special pleading. It shows inconsistency in applying principles. Burden of proof fallacy, shifting the burden of proof to someone else rather than providing evidence for one's own claim. For instance, stating, "Prove that my new product is ineffective," places the burden on others to disprove it rather than providing evidence for its effectiveness. False cause, incorrectly linking a cause and effect. For example, attributing a rise in crime rates to a recent policy change without considering other contributing factors like economic downturns or social changes is a false cause. No true Scotsman, redefining a term to exclude counterexamples. For example, if someone claims no true environmentalist would drive a car, and then excludes those who do drive as not true environmentalists, they are committing the no true Scotsman fallacy, slippery slope, suggesting that a minor action will lead to major and undesirable consequences. For example, claiming that allowing any form of censorship will inevitably lead to complete government control of all media is a slippery slope argument. Composition fallacy, assuming that what is true of a part is true of the whole. For instance, believing that because one component of a machine is high quality, the entire machine must be high quality is a composition fallacy. Division fallacy, assuming that what is true of the whole must be true of its parts. For example, if a car is known for its excellent performance, assuming that every part of the car is also excellent would be a division fallacy. Anecdotal fallacy, using personal stories or anecdotes as evidence rather than scientific data or systematic research. For instance, citing a personal success story with a particular diet to claim it works universally is an anecdotal fallacy. Appeal to ignorance, asserting that a claim is true because it hasn't been proven false or vice versa. For example, there is no evidence that extraterrestrials do not exist, so they must exist, uses lack of evidence as proof of a claim. Affirming the consequent, inferring the antecedent from the consequent in a conditional statement. For example, if it is raining, the ground will be wet. The ground is wet, so it must be raining, incorrectly assumes that the presence of wet ground confirms rain as the cause. Cherry picking, selectively presenting evidence that supports a claim while ignoring evidence that contradicts it. For example, highlighting only successful trials of a medication while ignoring studies that show negative results is cherry picking. Equivocation, using a word with multiple meanings ambiguously within the same argument. For example, using light to mean both not heavy and illumination in the same argument without clarifying the context is equivocation. Middle ground fallacy, assuming that a compromise between two extremes is always the correct solution. For example, if two parties have opposing views on a policy, assuming that the average of their positions is the best solution is a middle ground fallacy. Sunk cost fallacy, continuing an endeavor based on the resources already invested rather than its current value. For instance, continuing to invest in a failing project because of the amount already spent is the sunk cost fallacy. Appeal to tradition, arguing that something is correct or better because it has been done or believed for a long time. For example, maintaining outdated practices in a company simply because that's the way it's always been done is an appeal to tradition. Psychologist's fallacy, assuming others have the same thoughts and feelings as oneself, for instance. Believing that everyone shares your personal opinions or emotional responses to a situation is the psychologist's fallacy. Fallacy of the single cause, attributing an outcome to one cause when multiple factors are involved. For example, blaming a country's economic crisis solely on one policy without considering other contributing factors is the fallacy of the single cause. Ludic Fallacy, applying simplistic models or rules from games to complex real-world situations. For example, using game theory strategies designed for controlled environments to solve real-world problems is the Ludic Fallacy. Proof by assertion, repeating a statement as if it is true without providing evidence. For example, repeatedly saying climate change is a hoax without offering scientific proof is proof by assertion. Historical fallacy, misinterpreting historical events or contexts to support an argument. For example, using outdated historical examples to justify current policies can be a historical fallacy if it ignores contemporary differences. Inflation of conflict, exaggerating the significance or scope of a conflict. For example, presenting a minor disagreement as a major dispute or crisis is an inflation of conflict. Vacuous truth, a statement that is technically true but lacks substantive meaning. For example, saying all bachelors are unmarried is technically true but provides no meaningful information. Reification fallacy, treating abstract concepts as if they were concrete entities. For example, referring to society as if it has its own intentions and actions is the reification fallacy. Retrospective determinism, believing that past events were inevitable or predictable after they have occurred. For example, claiming that historical events were bound to happen because they did happen is retrospective determinism. Two wrongs make a right, justifying a wrong action by pointing out another wrong action. For example, excusing unethical behavior by citing other unethical behaviors as precedent is the two wrongs make a right fallacy. Fallacy fallacy, assuming that if an argument contains a fallacy, its conclusion is necessarily false. For example, dismissing a valid argument simply because it contains a logical error is the fallacy fallacy. Appeal to the stone, dismissing an argument as absurd without addressing its substance. For example, saying, "That's ridiculous, so we don't need to discuss it," without engaging with the argument's content is an appeal to the stone. Thank you for watching so far. If you enjoyed this content, please like this video and subscribe to my channel to be notified of our future videos.